Can Tyler Allgeier carry the Falcons to victory against the Ravens? And where are expectations for Desmond Ridder entering his second NFL start? Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta joins me to talk Week 16 keys to victory and which young players we've got our eyes on that can not only help the team, but themselves over these final 3 games.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So guys, you know me, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, and a.k.a. the very humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family, your team every day. In today's episode of Locked On Falcons is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for my listeners. You can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. And guys, we thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. Of course, it's free and available Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, Spotify, and YouTube. If you subscribe to Locked On Falcons on YouTube, and you should, you will get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. And of course, you can also check out Locked On Falcons on your Roku and Amazon Fire TV as part of that Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family. You can get Locked On Hawks, Locked On Bulldogs, Locked On Braves, Locked On Sports Atlanta A to Z with Mark Zinno, Hitting Hard with John Chucker, and of course, ATL Day Ones with Jarvis Davis and Tanitra Batiste, all on the Locked On Sports Atlanta app. Just download Locked On Sports Atlanta on your Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So speaking of ATL Day Ones, I got Jarvis Davis with me here, the very humble host of that co-host,
Sometimes
I should
I can
say.
be humble. Sometimes I'm humble.
Yeah. Sometimes. And we're going to be talking about what we usually talk about to wrap up the week, sort of get Jarvis's key to victory in this Saturday matchup on Christmas Eve between the Falcons and Ravens. But first, I want to give you guys a little bit of an update on the quarterback situation for the Ravens. That was a little bit up in the air when we did Crossover Thursday with Locked On Ravens host Kevin Ostreicher yesterday. Lamar Jackson is out, as expected. Tyler Huntley will start despite some soreness in his shoulder. So we will see Tyler Huntley on Saturday. But Jarvis, we're not here to talk about Tyler Huntley. We're talking about the Falcons' own quarterback concerns. And last week we talked about whether or not the expectations for Desmond Ridder going into his debut start against the Saints on the road were too high. And I kind of want to have a follow-up conversation with you about that, and I'll stop talking in a second, guys. But before we get into what Jarvis's expectations are going into Desmond Ridder's sort of second start, I'll talk a little bit about my coming out of that first game. I tried to temper my expectations, but I came away a little disappointed with Desmond Ridder in that starting game. I figured he probably would look like a rookie quarterback, but I kind of wanted him to look like a, not your typical rookie quarterback. Like, oh, like there's something different to this guy as a rookie quarterback compared to your typical rookie quarterback. And unfortunately, he looked a little bit more like a typical rookie quarterback. But part of me kind of wonders, as the game wore on, he seemed to settle things in. And if not for an untimely Drake London fumble there in the fourth quarter, maybe we're, having a very different conversation today here. But I will stop talking now, Jarvis, and give you the floor. Sort of what are your sort of follow-up to last week's conversation and your expectations now for Desmond Ridder going into this Ravens game?
I mean, my expectations were he's probably going to look like a rookie quarterback from time to time, and I think on the other side of that, I thought that he would be a guy that will show you something, right? Show you that he can connect with wide receivers, and that's one thing that we haven't been able to see consistently throughout this entire season. And I think he checked the box on that, right? He definitely has a rapport with Drake London. I don't think nobody can argue against that. However you feel about Desmond Ridder and the Marcus Mariota situation, whether he left the team or you don't like Desmond Ridder or you want Bryce Wilson or whoever, Bryce Young, all those quarterbacks coming out next year, Will Levis, whoever. But I think that, and my expectations are going to be pretty much the same, right? But the only thing that I really that kind of concerned me a little bit. I felt like he was seeing ghosts out there, and kind of anticipating the rush a little bit too much. Just from because it really wasn't there from time to time. Because I think that he stepped into some sacks, and I definitely think he stepped into one. Where Chris Lindstrom had defensive tackle, his name escapes me, that who he was blocking, but he essentially stepped right into where Chris Lindstrom was blocking the defensive tackle down for the New Orleans Saints. So I think that's something that I feel like if he can anticipate them protecting him, which they can do for the most part, I think that he'll be better off, because he's the type of guy that I feel like can make that necessary throw, step into that throw and make it, even when that pressure is there. He has the arm strength to do it, and I think that he has the mental fortitude to do it as well. So from coming into this game, I think that my expectations are that he'll continue to show that he has some good assets that this team can work with, that Arthur Smith can work with from a play calling standpoint, and be able to connect on some shot plays that is going to help them out in the long run as they continue to get Tyler Allgeier involved. And I think that that's something that he's going to be him going to be a BFF for Desmond Ridder. As much as Drake London and Desmond Ridder are bros and roommates, I think Desmond Ridder is going to start falling in love with him some Tyler Allgeier.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And, it's interesting you mentioned about him, sort of his feel for pressure. That was something that he mentioned this past week to the media, talking about maybe he was a little bit quick on the trigger from his days at Cincinnati, knowing that he didn't necessarily have all the time in the world and kind of expecting, that pass rush in the NFL to get home quicker. And so that was one of the things that he mentioned that he wanted to work on going into the second game, and being a little bit more patient and understanding, like, when he sees it, he can throw it and that sort of thing. And we'll see with Calais Campbell out this week, that will take a very big load off of Elijah Wilkinson and some of those interior guys, because Calais Campbell is he's a monster. This man's like 40
he
years
ain't
old.
old Calais, but he definitely can get some, he can take advantage of some folks that don't supposed to be there.
Yes. You can be 45 years old or 37 or however old he is, but when you're 6'8", 300 pounds with his type of power, like, that don't go away. He's got that old man strength.
Yeah, that stuff, like I feel like I'm into my old man strength, because I may be a little bit stronger than it was when I actually was playing college football. So yeah, like Calais Campbell got that old man strength, and it's probably a good thing that for Elijah and Drew Dahlman that he won't be playing. So there you go.
Yeah. So we'll pick Jarvis's brain on sort of where his key to victory is going into this game for Desmond Ridder. Maybe it's giving the ball to Tyler Allgeier. We'll get into all of that, guys, as we continue today's episode. But, since Jarvis is here, I got to plug the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast feed, guys. You got 3 shows covering the local sports, national sports. You got Jarvis and Tanitra on ATL Day Ones. You got John Chuckery on Hitting Hard. And, of course, you got Mark Zeno on A to Z. You can find them all in the same podcast feed. Of course, subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on wherever you get your podcast. But if you subscribe to it on YouTube, guys, you can also get the Locked On Falcons postcast, where Jarvis and I will be coming not on Sunday afternoon immediately after kickoff. It is Saturday afternoon immediately after kickoff. Christmas Eve, we're giving you that early Christmas present, guys, immediately after the game, to give you our reactions to the game. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube so you can get that postcast immediately after kickoff. And guys, I want to tell you about Turo, the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want, from a community of local hosts. You can browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and now in Australia. You can book that spacious SUV for that upcoming family road trip. You can get a classic or luxury car for a special event or holiday. Find that affordable economy car that you need on a budget just to get you from A to B. Or you can test drive that new electric vehicle to see if it fits your new lifestyle. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car directly to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions do apply. So ditch the boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. That's Turo.com. Now, on a more serious note, guys, Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in the states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high can get you a DUI. And if you don't think law enforcement can tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell, everyone can tell. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow down response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. Driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI, paid for by NHTSA. Guys, I want to thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen. And of course, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, from the stories that matter, or from the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So, Jarvis, let's talk keys to victory going into this Saturday matchup with the Baltimore Ravens. For you, what is the thing that the Falcons need to do in order to walk away Saturday with a win?
I think offensively, it's pretty simple, right? Give Tyler Allgeier the football. We know the Baltimore Ravens are a top 10 defense in the NFL. I get it. I understand. However, the Falcons have gotten themselves into trouble a lot this year by getting out of character, trying new things, trying to push the ball down the field. I get it. I understand. Desmond really got an arm. He has a propensity to put the ball in the receiver's hands, right? You know, pretty consistently. Not as much as you would like, obviously. Over 65% or 60% is definitely the goal, but he obviously didn't achieve that. But I think for Desmond Ritter's sake, I think if you don't get yourself into a situation where you're down 13, 14 points like you were in New Orleans, I think you'd be in pretty good shape, turning around and handing the ball off. But defensively, I think the main thing for Dean Pease's company is to not give Huntley a lot of time when they do pass, and you might want to guard the tight end because Mark Andrews is pretty doggone good. He's really good at football, and the Falcons allowed a guy who was literally just coming off of injury and Juwan Johnson to go for 2 tugs, like within like the first 8 minutes of the game. Like, wow, like what happened? Like they just let him run scot-free. And Michael Walker was in on that play, and we didn't see Michael Walker anymore after that play, or not as much as we normally see Michael Walker. So I think that they need to make sure they're believing what they're seeing, making sure that, you know, because we know that the Ravens are going to throw all type of RPOs and play actions, all that stuff. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at that defense. So they're going to have to be really, really studied up, so to speak, if I can use that term, and make sure they are getting to the quarterback. Because when they do pass, you can't allow Huntley to, you know, have a lot of time back there because he will pick you apart because we've seen it. We've seen him do it before.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll be curious to see how the weather affects this game. It's going to be cold. Looking over, you know, weather.com and whatnot, and sort of their projections for what that temperature is going to be in Baltimore around kickoff on Saturday. You know, I think earlier in the week people were saying like 7 degrees. At least the current updates are closer to maybe 20 degrees. That's still cold, right? That's not cold. As you know, 7 degrees is ridiculous, but 20 degrees is still very cold. The wind is going to be in that 15 mile per hour range, which is right around where you're worried a little bit about, you know, kickoffs and that could impact not kickoffs, field goals, and you know maybe you're not as willing to trot out Younghoe Koo for those 50+ yard field goals anymore, so that's going to have an impact on the game. And I'm going to be very curious to see how conservative Arthur Smith is in this matchup, right? That we you know, we've been talking all year long about, you know, evolving the offense and being more balanced because we know the Falcons can run the ball. We don't know if they can throw the ball. That's been, you know, the thing that ultimately kind of led to Marcus Mariota getting benched and wanting to see if Desmond Ridder could uplift that. And we kind of saw that early in the game where they kind of came out throwing, although some of that was owed to the fact that they fell into a deep hole very early in that game, as you just mentioned, Jarvis. But as the game wore on, they kind of reverted back to their old style of, let's run it 8 straight times and then we'll throw the ball type. That has been very effective, and that seemed to help Desmond Ridder get into the flow of the game. So I wonder if they kind of start out playing that way, or do they come out again trying to throw the ball? But you would think in these weather conditions that you would probably go a little bit more conservative. So it'll be interesting to see, Jarvis, when you and I are talking on that postcast on Saturday. What are we talking about Arthur Smith's game plan and play calling, particularly early on in the game?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because as much as I know, I just mentioned, like, get a rock to Tyler Allgeier, but you're gonna have to be really patient with that, because like you're going up against a really good, solid run defense, but you have to move them, right? You have to move those linebackers. You have to move those safeties if they start creeping up in that box. And how you move them, you go play action and you take a shot and you connect on those shots. And I think that's what Arthur Smith is going to have to really figure out, and how to balance that, because he's gonna see some things in that first drive or that first series that's gonna say it's gonna be very, very tempting. And to be honest with you, I can't blame him if he does take a shot, because at the end of the day, you want to at least put on tape that, hey, if you put 9 men in the box or 8 men in the box, or however you want to do number it, like, you have to be able to take advantage of that, because you have some guys on the outside that can do it. And I know that the rapport between Olamide Zaccheaus and Desmond Ridder is not looking that great right now, but they're going to have to get some rapport in these last few games, because they're going to have some opportunities, because defenses are going to be keying in on that run game all for the rest of the season. And I think that, Desmond Ridder is going to have a lot of practice in taking those shots and trying to connect downfield.
Yeah, definitely. So, Zaccheaus is interesting, because we're going to wrap up today's episode talking about some players that we're going to keep our eye on down the stretch. And Zaccheaus is one of those players that's on my list of guys, but we'll get sort of Jarvis on some players that he's going to be keeping his eye on for these final 3 games, whether it's to see if these guys can earn a new contract, to see if these guys can help impact the football game, or maybe it's something to set up next season. We'll get into all of that as we continue today's episode. But before we get there, guys, we are sponsored by BetOnline, and the line has moved a couple of times this week, and there's some interesting info that I want to share with you guys. So we'll play a video, and then we'll talk a little bit more about all the great things that you can do at BetOnline.
Atlanta Falcons at Baltimore Ravens. Even though the 9-5 Ravens have just 2 touchdowns in their last 3 games, they open as 6.5-point home favorites versus the 5-9 Falcons. Throughout the week, the spread moved up to Baltimore -8 before settling at -7. With Lamar Jackson most likely sidelined another week, the Falcons appear to be the public play. 73% of the early cash and 65% of the bettors are taking the points.
And that makes absolute sense to take the points. The line has even moved since that breakdown. It's now at 6.5 points, with the Falcons are underdogs. I know I'm going to take the points. Maybe you guys are going to take the points for the Falcons to cover that type of spread. And of course, the best place to go to do that is the number one source for your sports betting info. That is betonline.net. Whether you're looking for that info, that stats, the news, the analysis, or podcast, BetOnline is the place to go. You'll get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football, basketball, soccer to esports. They've got it all at BetOnline. And I know this time of year, it's a great time to head on over to betonline.net so that you can get money back in your pocket after you spent it for the holidays. And January is a great month to check out betonline.net. You got tennis, Australian Open, you got the Winter X Games, and maybe you're not interested in those things. Maybe you're interested in, I don't know, playoffs? Yeah, go check out betonline.net. Use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, Jarvis, wrapping up today's Locked On Falcons here, and I asked you, before we got on air to let you know, like, yeah, let's talk about some players that, you're going to be keeping your eye on down the stretch. You've already mentioned Tyler Allgeier as having a big impact on this game. We know, obviously, everybody's going to have their eyes on Desmond Ridder, but who are some players for you that you're going to be keeping your eye on over these next 3 weeks, and why?
Can I start with Troy Anderson? Yeah, let's start there. So I got a chance to kind of dig into a couple of things, and as far as what he brings to the table, right? Like obviously you can see the athletic ability is there. You know he can run. We know he's fast. My thing right now is for these last few games is for Troy Anderson to show that he has the necessary instinct to play the linebacker position in the NFL, because that's the thing, that's the key, right? Because I've looked at, was watching the film and checking out Demario Davis. When I say, like, I was not shocked at all when he was named to the Pro Bowl. You talking about just so instinctful, like just reading his keys so quickly and diagnosing plays just like that. It's just amazing how he's able to shoot that gun and get into those gaps and make plays behind the line of scrimmage. That's what I want to see from Troy Anderson. I know people are like, well, Jarvis, he's a rookie. I don't give a damn. Like instincts and diagnosing plays are the basic functions of a linebacker. And I don't give a crap how athletic, how fast you are. If you aren't able to do those things in the NFL, you won't be around for long. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to have my eye on him. Another guy that I'm going to put these two guys in the same category, D'Angelo Malone and Arnold Ebiketie. I want those guys to get home, man. Those are the guys that Arnold Ebiketie, he's a guy that I think he's definitely developing at a faster pace than D'Angelo. He's shown me some things from his hand coordination and being able to use moves and them actually working, but not necessarily being able to get home and being close. He's gotten a couple sacks on the year, so I think that's the thing that I want to continue to watch him and see him do and continue to develop, and D'Angelo Malone as well, and just being confident in what you're able to bring to the table. So I think those young guys are guys that I'm definitely going to have an eye on defensively. And also, you talked about, with the rapport with Drake London. I want to see him kind of continue to. I want to see him get in the end zone a little bit more. Once the Falcons get down to that red zone, I want to see them finish drives and use the rookie, use him for what he is, right? What he was sold us. He was sold to us. Hey, this is an athlete. A guy played basketball at USC, scholarship player, basketball and football and all that good stuff. I want to see him get utilized because we kind of suffer from withdrawal with Kyle Pitts being out there and not being used in the red zone. So I want to see Drake, continue to develop that rapport that he has with Desmond Ridder.
I think those are some good picks. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned Demario Davis, because I remember when he was coming out, I think like Northern Illinois, and the Jets took him, and I was like, he's a fast, athletic guy, but I don't know if he has the quite the instincts. And you look at his early career in New York, and he was a guy that could run around and do some things, but it didn't quite come together for him. And then all of a sudden, he goes to New Orleans. I think he actually went somewhere else and then went back to New York and then went to New Orleans. And ever since he's been in New Orleans, he's been an absolute monster and a headache for all the Falcons quarterbacks. And so, I think, there's a lot Troy Anderson can learn from Demario Davis as a good comparison there. For me, some of the players I'm looking at, Tyler Allgeier is one of those guys. Everybody knows that listens to this podcast regularly. I wasn't that high on the Allgeier pick. I thought he was a solid player, sort of an RB2. And for most of the season, that's kind of what he looked like. And then these last couple of weeks, he's really turned it on, become very good after contact. That was really what stood out against the Saints game. You saw similar from Cordero Patterson against the Saints in that week 1 game. But, these next couple of teams and this week against the Ravens, we'll see if he can sort of keep that going. And we'll see if he can put the Bijan Robinson hype to rest. But I'll keep talking about Bijan Robinson because I know Tyler's out there reading the tweets because he's out here being like, I'm gonna prove you wrong, Aaron. So
Anthony Rush, Anthony Rush book of hymns right there, right?
Yeah. So if me tweeting about Bijan Robinson leads to Tyler Allgeier having 100+ yard games, I'm gonna keep tweeting about him to keep that thing going. But Zaccheaus is another guy I got my eye on. Jarvis, you mentioned it. we saw the rapport with Desmond Ridder and Drake London. We didn't see it with Olamide Zaccheaus and Desmond Ridder. And Zaccheaus, obviously we know the Falcons don't have a high volume passing game, but I feel like Olamide Zaccheaus consistently was showing out, this season on limited opportunities, particularly moving the chains in on third downs and whatnot. And so I kind of want to see that come back, these last couple of games between him and Desmond Ridder, because, Zaccheaus is a free agent this offseason. And, prior to last week, looked like he was a guy that was well on his way to earning a new contract. But if suddenly he disappears in the offense, down the stretch, that does put that a little bit, up in the air in terms of his status next year going into the offseason. And two other guys on the defensive front that I want to mention that have impressed me these last couple of weeks. Again, no one's going to sit here and act like they're huge difference makers, but Timmy Horn and Jalen Dalton, they have flashed a couple of times these last couple of games, being able to play, not only nose tackle, but, the Falcons are mixing in some 4-3 under fronts, and they're asking those guys to play some 5 technique as that strong side defensive end as well. And they've been flashing. And Timmy Horn was a guy that I was dogging early in the season because I'm like, this guy's not doing anything. He's just out there just taking up, time or whatever. But I thought he really kind of flashed a couple of times in that Saints game, and Jalen Dalton as well as a pass rusher. You've seen a couple of times where he's been the guy next to Grady Jarrett in those third down situations and shows a lot of power. So those are two guys that I'm very curious to see if they continue to flash these last 3 games. I feel like the Falcons this offseason are going to need to invest significant resources in upgrading that interior D line, because you kind of look at that group and you say, okay, Grady Jarrett, we know he's good. Taquan Graham looks like he's going to be good, but I don't know about anybody else. And I'm curious if Dalton and Horn, if they can come on, continue to show those flashes, not to sit here and say, oh, we don't need to go out there and sign D line help because, Jalen Dalton and Timmy Horn. But
or draft Jalen Carter. Hashtag draft Jalen Carter.
If they finish the season strong, part of me is going to be curious to sort of see, okay, where are they going to be a year from now? That big jump that those guys can make, from year 1 to year 2. And I know Jalen Dalton's been sort of kicking around the league, so it's not necessarily his rookie season, but with that development, getting actual reps this year as opposed to being on a practice squad, I do wonder where they can be next summer. And maybe even though the Falcons may go out there and sign 2 or 3 or draft 2 or 3 guys to help them up front, maybe we'll be looking at this position as a position of strength because of the improvements that guys like Dalton and Horn show. So it's a lot of young guys right now that we're really is sort of focused on. Anybody else on your list, Jarvis, before we wrap up today's episode?
No, man, I like the Timmy Horn one and the Jalen Dalton one, because when you think about when those guys were brought in, there were no expectations, right? But being out there and watching those guys out there practicing, and during the summertime and training camp, and those guys flashed. They flashed, and you say, okay, they flashed against guys that probably are selling insurance right now. But what can they do when they go up against real NFL competition? 53 roster guys, 53-man roster guys. And they, like I said, they're not world beaters, but they're guys that can be cheap labor. Let's just keep it a buck. Keep it funky. You know what I'm saying? Because they need that. The Falcons need as many guys that can be rotational guys and aren't that expensive as they possibly can get, because we know that it's anemic on that defensive line, especially on the interior, as far as from a depth standpoint. So those are some of the things that I think that I really like from those guys. But as much as Lorenzo Carter can, play himself into a contract, I'm all for that. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna have an eye on old Zoe. He was able to get home last week, so continue to get home. And he went on a nice little streak with the New York Giants towards the end of last year. So hey, let's see another one. Get you another year with an option on year 2. So earn these contracts, man, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Absolutely. They're all independent contractors, scrapping it out for the team and whatnot. So that's where we're going to leave it, guys. Really appreciate Jarvis, as usual, joining me to wrap up the week. And of course, we'll be back on Saturday for that Locked On Falcons postcast on the Locked On Sports Atlanta YouTube platform. And of course, then I don't know what the plan is for me to do next week with, Sunday off, so to speak. But I'll probably throw out some content. So, we might have an extra day of content, guys. And so that gives you the floor to send in some questions for a future Q&A and mailbag that we may be able to get into on Monday or something like that. So, of course, hit me up in the Discord, the link in the description below. You can also hit me up via email at lockedonfalcons@mail.com, or, of course, on social media at Locked On Falcons on Facebook and Twitter. And, of course, leave a comment here on the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel and page. So, guys, really appreciate you joining us. I hope you guys have a great holiday weekend. Enjoy yourself. Drive safe out there. If you are traveling, stay warm. If you're, in one of these places where it's going to be a little bit chilly here, but we will be back, Jarvis and myself, on Saturday for that Locked On Falcons postcast on Locked On Sports Atlanta. We thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen. Always check out Locked On Sports Atlanta and Locked On Sports Today for your second listens, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Can Tyler Allgeier carry the Falcons to victory in... I hate it. Okay, we'll do it again. We'll do it live.